to get started, I'm going to ask you to help me introduce about you and the work that you do for me and the audience here. Can you do that, please?
Sure. So I have been a coach for over 20 years.
Mm.
So I started working as a coach very early when coaching was called life coaching. And I was trained as a life coach, but very shortly after I got trained, I decided I really enjoyed the career focus and helping people think about what they want to do for work or what would make them happier in their jobs. And a lot of that had to do with the fact that I had been through several different jobs and careers where I found myself not being all that happy. So I wanted to help other people with those things. So I really didn't find coaching till I was close to 40 years old. And that actually is part of one of the things that I like to talk to people about now is to say, it's never too late to find a career that you find satisfying and fulfilling. So that's an important piece. But what I do now, it's been building over the years that I've been a coach, is I started off helping people with their careers and with their job search. And then I expanded that practice and included things like going into companies and workplaces and working with teams and groups of people so that I could help people in the workplace work together better. So it's like workplace communication and team building, because I found that part of the reason why I think some people find themselves unhappy at work or feeling out of place at work is due to the fact that they're unhappy with the people they work with, or they don't like their boss. Sometimes it's not the work itself that they don't like. It's actually the culture or the environment that they're in. And so that got me intrigued about things like leadership and teamwork and things like that. So I expanded my practice to include facilitation work, training, workshops, and team building. So I built that. So that's the beauty of a coaching career, is that there are a lot of different ways you can use coaching skills to work with both individuals and groups. And so I did that. And I also work with executives. So that ties in with a lot of the work and the interests I have in leadership. So I do one-on-one coaching with individuals who are both looking to redefine what they want their career to look like, or people who are looking to advance themselves, whether they're looking to become an executive or they may already be an executive, but they're trying to enhance their leadership skills or their communication skills, usually. And then a few years ago, I really wanted to try to reach a broader group of people and not just individuals or one company at a time. I felt like I had a lot more to say, but wanted to reach more people. So I started a podcast, and that was about 3.5 years ago. And I have a weekly podcast that is called Work from the Inside Out. And I interview an individual, usually an individual, sometimes a couple of people at once. And we talk about their career journey and what they did to get to where they are today. And so we'll talk about their entire journey. We may even talk about what they dreamed of as a child, or we really talk about their whole life. I love talking to people about their story. And so this week I will be broadcasting episode 170. So it's been every week. And then about 2 years ago, I started writing a book because I really wanted to get some of those lessons learned from those stories. I wanted to get those out there. So I think the book, there's a big poster right here of the book. And the book is also called Work from the Inside Out: Break Through 9 Common Obstacles and Design a Career That Fulfills You. So what I did was I took out of my coaching practice and out of the podcast some key themes that seem to be the things that show up regularly, that are the main things that hold people back from finding a more fulfilling or satisfying career path. And those became the chapters of the book. And so I spent quite a bit of time writing the book, and I hired a writing coach. So I really engaged in a whole new process, almost a whole new identity for myself. In some ways, I discovered myself as a writer that I didn't know existed. I just thought, I'll write a book. I know how to write. But now I can say, I'm an author. Wow. It's kind of that was a big deal. So that book came out a couple of months ago, and I feel very good about that. And so that's now out, and that book includes exercises and reflective questions, things that people can do themselves so that they can do some of the work themselves and figure out what they want for themselves. So I tried to make the book interesting and engaging. There's a lot of stories in the book from my podcast guests, but also I wanted the book to be practical. I think a big part of my coaching practice and the way that I work with people is I want people to dream to an extent about what's possible and how they could find, a career that really satisfies and fulfills them. But I also very practical. I believe that you don't throw everything out so you can fulfill some sort of dream. You still have to take care of the practical matters of life.
Wow.
So I try to balance those out. I'm not one of these coaches who says, follow your passion, money will follow. No. Follow your passion, but make sure you have some money too. So that's a part of. I probably gave you a lot more than what you asked for, but the other piece is now that I'm trying to talk to people like yourself and talk to audiences and share some of the ideas that I'm trying to put out there, because I think that there are quite a few people who are rethinking what they want for work or how they want to work. And I want to provide whatever I can to help inspire them to go after what they really want. So
Thank you so much for sharing your whole journey from the beginning 20 something years ago, right? And you've been doing fantastic podcasts that I follow from November of 2018, when you first started your episode 000. So while you love, finding the people, the happiness at work, right, up until the episode last week. And we're gonna get to that work and the work that you do for writing a book at a later time. But now I want you to bring all the way back again, okay?
sure.
Because you've been interviewing people for their career journey, and then now you've been interviewed for your journey too with me. When you were a kid, right? Have you dreamed of becoming what you're doing today? What was your dream back then?
So my dream, I'd say from a very young age, was always wanted to help people. Even as a very young child, I was inspired by Helen Keller, who was, I don't know if people will know who she was, but she was an advocate for people who were both sight impaired or blind and deaf. So she was, here in the United States, she was a very well-known person, probably in the early or mid 1900s. As a little girl, I knew who she was. There was a movie made about her as well. I didn't know her personally, but she had no sight and no hearing, and I just was fascinated by her. And she turned out to be a teacher, and she wrote books, and I just thought, if somebody like her could find their way in the world and inspire other people without having sight and without having hearing, what could I do to help other people who might have, certain disabilities or certain things that maybe made their lives a little more difficult? And so those were the kinds of things I thought about as a young child. I will also say that my parents were a big influence. My mother was a social worker. She worked in a nursing home where they took care of elderly people who were sick. And my father was a psychologist, and he worked with children. So I had a lot of influences at home in terms of people who were in the helping service profession. So there was a lot of conversations around the dinner table about special people that they were helping and the ways they were helping people. And I always found that fascinating. So I was always doing volunteer work, even as a young kid, always finding something to do to help other people, and always found that inspiring. And in college, I majored in psychology, and my first job out of college was in the mental health field, and I worked with people who were chronically mentally ill and had been in long-term institutions, and they were starting to close the institutions here and have people live in the community. And so I was trying to work with people and help them adjust to life in the community after some of them had been living in these big institutions for 30, 40 years. And it was like, hey, now you have your independence. Go and make the adjustment.
and and I would love to know, earlier you mentioned about, you've been working for a few jobs and then you didn't see yourself being fully happy, fully engaged. So,
Yeah.
so you transform onto doing something different and becoming a career coach, right? So do you remember during that period of time, what happened inside of you that made you do the career changing totally like this?
Yeah. Oh, I can tell you, sure. So there were several times that happened. Several times that I became unhappy in the work I was doing. Even the mental health job, it's very, very difficult work. And I don't mean difficult as in mentally difficult. I mean, intellectually difficult. It was emotionally very difficult. And after a few years, and I was young, I was in my early 20s, I would say I got burnt out. And so after a few years of doing that work, I realized, I need to think about what I'm going to do next, because this was work that it didn't pay very well. The hours were very long, and it was very hard to help people the people who I was there to help were very difficult to help. So after a few years of that, I decided I needed to do something different. And I actually from there, I actually decided to go into public policy, because the people who I was helping, the program I was working in was publicly funded. And I thought, well, let me find out who's making the decisions about how those programs are funded, because politicians are making those decisions. So I thought, well, let me go into public policy and politics and find out how to make those decisions. So I did that. I was able to get a job working for a politician and working on policies that were very much related to the kind of work I had been doing in the community. And so that was fascinating. But after a few years, I had a real taste of the political world. And it wasn't just about policy. It was also very, very political. And I realized that the world of politics I was not well suited to that. So I thought, okay, I got to do something else because I don't like politics. But I don't regret either job. You know, there were just things that over time I realized this is not something I can do long term. So then I started to do fundraising work
Mm.
because when I was doing the public policy work, I learned how to write grants and proposals to get funding. So I sort of slipped into something that I was capable of.
Mm.
And I did that for a few years, but I realized that was too isolating. It wasn't involved with people enough.
Mm.
So I learned a lesson. Every step of the way, I learned something. So I learned a lesson there that just do something because you can do it, because you're capable of doing it.
Mm.
Something that also suits who you are as a person, something you'll enjoy.
Mm.
So in that case, I made a choice to do something because I was capable of it, but didn't enjoy it,
Mm.
you know?
Yes.
So, so that was an interesting learning experience as well. In the meantime, I also went back to school and got a master's in business administration because I wanted to also understand how to run an organization in a healthy way. I had a lot of exposure to a lot of organizations that I saw were really struggling.
Mm.
Wanted to know, how can you help an organization run better? Because I
Wow.
saw these organizations were trying to do a lot of good for a
Mm.
lot of people who needed help, but they were struggling. They were losing money, or they weren't well funded. And I wanted to see what would it take to run an organization better. So I
Mm.
went and got my MBA. So there
Wow.
were a number of things I did. So everything I did had a reason behind it.
Ah.
And I learned something along the way, but I learned what I liked and I learned what I didn't like.
Ah.
And I will say that sometimes here and there I had a boss that I didn't really like.
Mm.
What I also learned along the way was that I probably would be better off working for myself. So I don't think I'm the world's best employee. I don't really like to be told what to do. You know, some people really like the structure of an
Mm.
organization. They like to work as part of something bigger than themselves. I'm not one of those people.
Tammy, that's very brave of you back in 1999 to decided to have your own firm running, because if we look at uh, the flip of the coin, right? If you work for somebody, so at the end of the month, you get the paycheck that go directly to your bank account, right? So everything is stable, like it or not, it's a different story. But then
Yeah.
have being your own boss is another ball game, right? You have to look out for clients, start to deliver the service and everything, so you become 360 doing everything, superwoman, right? And
Well,
yeah.
let me tell you one thing, though. Let me tell you
Mm.
one thing about that because you're making me sound so brave. I was married
Mm.
and I had a husband who did not mind going to an office every day.
Mm.
So we had another income
Mm.
and we had health care benefits through him.
Mm.
So it was a big, but don't get me wrong, it still was a big decision,
Mm.
but wasn't as risky as it would be if I was completely on my own.
Yeah, I think that's a beautiful side of having somebody to support your decision. All time, all the long time, right? Yeah.
Right.
Mm.
Yeah. Although I will say this, even if I was on my own, I still would have done that,
Mm.
but it would have been a lot harder.
Yes.
Uh, for several years before 99, what I did was I gradually moved into starting my own business. So
Mm.
several years before that, I also had a child at that time. So I worked part-time for a job. I worked part-time, so I had a steady salary on a part-time basis.
Mm.
The other part of the time, I started my business.
Mm.
It was a different business because I was still doing fundraising. So I was doing I was doing fundraising consulting.
Mm.
And so I would start, because I knew I had to work for myself. So I worked for an employer part-time and I did part-time consulting. And then by 99, I was already doing coaching. And at that juncture, I realized that I could make it full-time. And then my husband and I, of course, had to have a big conversation about that. And I went full-time on my own. But so it was a big deal, but it was an easier decision because we had another full-time salary coming in.
Mm. So every step of the way, you guys communicated, plan, then execute, right? But
Yes, yes.
what intrigued me also is you earlier just said that back then the coaching, the career coach is not something like quite popular in America, but it's all about life coaching, right? So you're starting 23 years ago on decided to go into career coaching. Is pretty hard to tell people what it is as a career coach and what it is that the service that you provide to them. So how did you come to a client and offering that to them though back then?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, well, back then, there was such a thing as called career counseling, which was a
Mm.
little different, but coaching itself was new. So, when I was taking my coaching program, my coaching certification program, they were they were giving us a lot of coaching actually
Mm.
around how to talk to people about coaching. So, so I felt comfortable telling people about the training I was getting as a coach, how excited I was about it. And I just started having conversations with people about it and sharing my excitement about it. I think that there were a lot of people out there who had the same training I did who probably struggled with
Mm.
this quite a bit. But because I still had a part-time job and other things going on, I just sort of gradually grew it. In fact, my first client, my first paying client was actually the wife of one of my husband's cousins. I was at a family event and I started talking to her about what I was doing, and she said, "I need to hire you. I need you." I
Wow.
said, "Okay." I mean, I barely charged her anything, but there is a psychology behind, paying for a service, right?
Yeah.
So I charged her a little bit, but she was my first client. And and then and then I wasn't very shy about telling people about what I was doing. But it's interesting. It's a good question you ask because it's hard to get your hands around what is coaching. It's this thing. How do you describe it? And so what I would do is I would just share with people why I thought coaching was a good way of helping people grow and move their lives forward.
Mm.
Not to sell coaching to them, not to sell me to them. People would say to me, "How do you sell yourself?" I said,
Mm.
"I don't sell myself. I
Mm.
never sell myself because it's not about me.
Mm.
It's about helping other people get to where they want to get to in their lives, helping
Mm.
them get to that place." So that's the way I would talk to them about coaching. And I would say, this is why I'm excited about what coaching can do for people is it's a method or a group of methods that
Mm.
really helps people in a very positive way take the steps they need to understand themselves better
Mm.
and then get from where they are now to where they want to be.
Mm.
And it's a very healthy approach to accomplishing your goals. And if people were interested in learning more about it, I was always happy to offer them a complimentary consultation. So
Mm.
I always offered that to people. And I learned very early on that if I didn't want to talk about it anymore, I let it go.
Mm.
You know, I didn't push. And I think it grew, for me, it grew very organically, and it was all word of mouth for me. I didn't push it really hard, but it definitely grew word of mouth. But some coaches really do struggle with marketing and how you promote.
See, you started your company also work from the inside out. Your husband's cousin's wife first, right? So somebody from the inside the family then start to grow to the outside of the community. So,
Yeah,
so it's very
yeah,
consistent with the book that you're writing also.
yeah,
um,
yeah.
Tammy, I have one of my audience want to ask you this question.
Sure.
Okay, and then she's a very high ranked leader in multinational companies in Vietnam. All right, they operate in Vietnam actually, and one of the things that um, you know constrain her the most is the time to work with the people that she see their talents from within, but then these pupils struggle with finding, like with understanding themselves, and then with accepting that they can become more of what from who they are now. And then so she would want to ask you, how could you have that strength to talk to so many people who struggle at work, who are not happy and wants to come to you and do more with what they are doing at the moment? How can you find the strength to continue doing that?
So let me make sure I understand the question. Is it a matter of having the strength or the time?
the
I'm trying to
strength
understand
the strength,
the
because
strength.
sometimes it makes her feel really unhappy when, for example, like I am her employee. Okay, if I was her employee and she wants to develop me to the next level, but
Right.
then yes, but then there's a resistance for me, there's not collaborations for me, and she keeps
Oh,
seeing me that not going to my full potential, what I could become. So that
okay.
wearing her down in terms of energies and everything. And you, as
Yeah.
the career coaching, so you met many people like that and who are
Hmm.
not happy.
Yeah.
So how can you find the courage, the strength to continue to do it? To help the people to shine and grow.
So, well, first of all, I can only, and I hope this answers the question, but I'm happy to keep trying.
Sure.
So first of all, you can only coach somebody who wants to be coached. So
Mm,
first they have to want to grow, they have to want to reach for something.
mm,
So it can be very draining and tiring if you are trying to help someone grow,
mm,
move to the next level if they don't want to go there.
mm,
Now, it may be that they do want to go there, but perhaps they don't believe enough in themselves, or they're afraid, or, you know, or maybe they aren't really sure how to get there. And even though they feel your encouragement,
mm,
they're afraid to say, don't know. Times people, they are encouraged, even by their boss or by other people, they're encouraged to take the next step, but they're afraid to tell people that something they don't know, or they're afraid to ask questions
mm,
because they don't want to look like they don't know something. And
mm,
so it ends up, then their behavior ends up being misinterpreted, right? And then the person who has these high hopes and expectations of them, it can feel tiring to keep
mm,
trying to lift somebody up who isn't stepping up to the task, right?
yes.
So I think that one of the tools and it's not really a tool as in like a hammer or something. It's one of the methods that I use a lot, and that I actually encourage people to use, are what I call powerful questions.
Powerful questions.
Powerful questions.
Hmm.
And I'm happy to share a list of these questions with you and your audience.
Please.
So these questions, I didn't make them up. So, I can't take credit for them, but I will tell you they really are powerful. Um, so powerful questions are a great way to engage somebody in a conversation,
Mm.
to get them to self-reflect, to think about who they are or who they want to be or
Mm.
what they're capable of, but also to get the conversation going in a way that can and get that person to start to forward some action, to take some action forward. So if you think about it, you think about a time when somebody has asked you a great question,
Mm.
right? And almost the minute they ask you the question, you think, wow, that was a great question. That really got me thinking in a positive way about myself,
Mm.
or me thinking in a way that gets me thinking a little more deeply about myself and gets me thinking about what's possible for me going forward.
Mm.
Um, but it's also a great way to get the conversation moving forward so that you can then talk about what's possible moving forward. Some people need a little help getting to that next place. It doesn't mean that you have to do their thinking for them,
Mm.
but you have to work the conversation in a certain way to help them. Um, to maybe they're getting in their own way.
Mm.
They're just there's a little bit of insecurity, or they've been told by somebody over the years they can't do something when
Mm.
you see the possibility of them, right?
Mm.
So these powerful questions are a really great way to get them to think about their own limitations.
Mm.
So I'll give you an example.
Please.
So I was talking to somebody the other day who is starting to look for a new job,
Mm.
and she was feeling very anxious about it. And she said to me, she's got a nursing background, and she really doesn't want to go back into nursing because her last job was a very toxic
Mm.
situation, very, very difficult situation. And she said, I really don't want to have to go back nursing, really don't want to have to interview for jobs. I'm in no shape. She started crying. So we talked about, I said, well, tell me what your needs are for going back to work. What is
Mm.
it that your goals are? And so I totally took the conversation away from everything that was stressing her, the nursing and the interviewing.
Mm.
Talked about what is it that she's really trying to accomplish.
Mm.
Well, it turns out that, she's a couple of years away from retirement, and she needs to make a little bit of money, not nearly the amount she was making before. And I could see that she was really struggling. And she has other skills, or
Mm.
she had, even from her nursing background, she could use some of those skills without going back into the same kind of situation she was in before.
Mm.
So once we figured out what she needs to accomplish, we were able to then return to the original conversation. And I said, who says you have to go into nursing, and who says you're going to have to interview for jobs?
Mm.
We live in a time when it's a gig economy. People are starting their own little businesses. People are creating their own projects and work and
Mm.
earning money that way right now.
Mm.
I assume this is also happening in Vietnam. I don't know. I'm correct, but I
Yes.
think it's happening all over the world. So if you are really, you know, dreading and falling apart, the minute you think about even doing a job interview, well, let's find another way for you to make an income.
Mm.
You don't have to do that.
Mm. Wow.
And, I see her shoulders went down, and, I wasn't trying to fix it all for her, but what was happening is she could only see one perspective, you know.
Mm,
She was having a hard time seeing that there were many other options.
mm. So when we are stressed, we only see what's stressful to us, but not see other possibilities out there on the horizon that's unseen to us, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
we kind of think of things in all or nothing terms, you
Mm,
know. It can only be this way, you know.
mm,
And so, you know, and I think the scenario that you just shared with me about this employee, it sounds like somebody who might be they're either, you know, they either are in the wrong job,
mm,
they're not, if it's that draining to bring them along, or maybe there's something they're afraid of and they need just to get out of their own way
mm.
to my sense is that the person who asked the question sees some potential in this person, and it's frustrating to see that they're not stepping
Stepping
up
up, yes.
to it. And so it becomes exhausting to try to help them because it feels like you're just trying the same things and it's not working.
Yes, so that exactly her scenarios, and then she would like to seek for advice from you. How can you find that kind of strength so that regardless the efforts that you put out, you're not gonna be drained of your energies because of the result is not there. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think you have to find things that don't drain you. Like
Mm,
you have to have a toolkit, let's say.
mm,
Uh, you know, a toolkit of different approaches and different ways of dealing with things. So you have to understand what is it that's keeping this person from growing? What is it, what's going on with them? And then by understanding that, then you can try a few different approaches to
mm,
see what's going on, what will help them get to where they are. But if it's just, well, they won't do it, well, you have to dig a little deeper. But
mm,
if it's there's always another way to look. But
mm,
it takes practice. You know, you have to practice
mm,
these things. You know, I've been doing this a long time. So, you know, and this is the kind of thing that I help people with, right? This is the kinds of things that I coach people on, and I help them to build their toolkit and to build these kinds of skills
mm.
so that they can then be more effective in the workplace so that they don't get drained, right?
Wow. Thanks a lot for sharing. Um, I would like to ask next is regarding to because the podcast is something that you started before you wrote your book, right? Yes.
Mhm.
So what came up to your mind back then 3 years ago to start your own podcast? And the second big question that I want to ask you, you've been able to invite to your podcast a lot of amazing people. Yes, so I saw a lot of your speakers like Ron Carusi, John Badoni, and a lot of others people who are very well known in the area that they are doing. So
Yeah.
how did you do that at the very beginning?
Well, so it's my charm. No,
Mm.
just
No,
kidding.
it is maybe.
There's a couple of things that I've done.
Mm.
A couple of things. One is I'm a member of Dory Clark's. You probably know who Dory
Dory
Clark
Clark,
is.
yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So I am a member of Dory Clark's recognized expert community.
Ah.
I took her course, How to Become a Recognized Expert.
Mm.
And when you take that course, you then automatically become a member of this professional, what I call a professional community.
Mm.
Ron Carucci is also a member of that community.
Who?
And
Ah,
so
Ron.
Ron
Ah,
Carucci.
yes.
And so I met Ron through that community. Now, just because he's a member of that community doesn't automatically obligate him to be a guest on my podcast.
Mm.
But Ron happens to be a very generous person,
Mm.
and And he has a very interesting work history and background. And I really didn't know Ron very well, but I think actually somebody else in the community was helping Ron get to podcasts. I think he had hired somebody to help him. Yeah. So she has been sending guests my way.
Ah.
So she has a business. That's her business is she helps people get podcast, appearances, so to speak. But I'm not sure if she sent Ron my way or whether I met Ron on my own. I don't remember because I've had Ron on twice now. But so she has definitely introduced me to some wonderful people that way. So I've had some of these people I've had because they were, somebody pitched me and said, would you like to have this person as a guest? And I said, absolutely. But like, for example, John Baldoni, I saw that John was a Marshall Goldsmith 100 coach.
Yes.
And I happen to know a number of people who are Marshall Goldsmith 100 coaches, because a number of them are in Dory Clark's community. That means something to me. And I'll be honest with you, I was on LinkedIn one day, and I saw John's name popped up, and I was reading about him, and I thought he was a really interesting man. And I sent him a message on LinkedIn. He's not a member of Dory Clark's community. I sent him a message. I invited him to be a connection of mine on LinkedIn, and then I sent him a note on LinkedIn, and I said, I think you're really interesting. I'd love to be connected with you on LinkedIn, and would be willing to be a guest on my podcast.
Wow. Just ask. Huh?
And just asked him, and he said yes.
Wow.
Not only that, but then I went further, and I asked him to write an endorsement for my book, and he's yes.
Wow. It's very,
So
yeah, I think it's the courage and be brave enough to ask is very important. Because
and it was the courage.
Yeah.
It was yes. I was frightened to do it, but I thought, what's the worst thing that'll happen? He'll say no. He'll say no. He doesn't know me, but now I know him. He's a delightful human being. He's very kind. But it wasn't even just that. I thought he's a very well-known leadership expert. He's written a lot of books. He's very busy. I didn't know if he'd have time for me, but he made the time for me, and that's just the kind of person he is.
Yep.
And I have encouraged him over and over again to let me do him a favor. I'm willing to, reciprocate. So I was and there were several people that I have approached that way, just literally cold like that, whose work I've admired and invited them. But having a podcast is a great way to get into conversation with certain people.
Yep. And then a lot of conversation that you has really has a lot of meanings and meaningful things, so that people out there can always access to the podcast, to listen to the real people, real stories, so that they can learn, they can relearn and unlearn things that works for them, things that not working for them, things that they can expand to the next level. So I really enjoy that actually. So bravo, thanks for doing that.
And you know what else? I want to just say this is that, all of these people, even though, and not everybody I've had on the podcast is, that level of profile in terms of being, a thought leader in their field. I've interviewed people who nobody knows who they are. And what I've come to realize is everybody in their own way is brilliant, and everybody in their own way has a really interesting story.
Mm.
Um, I found out about somebody I grew up with. I grew up in the suburbs of New York City, and I saw that somebody I grew up with, who I was never really good friends with,
Mm.
had a very interesting story, and I reached out to her on Facebook, and she agreed to be a guest on my podcast, and I actually also used her story in my book too, because I thought her story was that interesting. And now
Beautiful.
we're connected, even though, and we grew up together. We used to take the school bus together, but, we were never great friends, but yet we're still connected in that way. So you just never know who has an interesting story, right?
Yep, yep, absolutely. Uh, I think it's very, very fascinating for me the way that I see you connecting to people, which lead me to the last question that I would want to address today is your book, okay?
Yes.
And this is the another different ball game that you do because writing something from what you know is not easy. Even that we think it's easy, but it's when the actual doing's never easy. So how's everything started? And then what motivates you to write that book?
So I had been thinking about this book for a long, long time.
Mm.
As I said, I really have always been fascinated in people's stories and how they started and how they got to where they are.
Mm.
I've always been interested in that. And I think that once I was in the recognized expert community, there's a lot of authors in that group of people. So I started getting a closer view of, and also doing the podcast, I started talking to more authors.
Mm.
So I got a little more of a taste of just what was involved in writing a book. Not a lot, but a little bit. And I was out to dinner with friends one night, and I just said out loud, next year I'm going to write a book. And then I went, did I just say that? I guess I read that. I guess I'm going to write a book. But so it was just sort of came out of me. But I knew what the book was going to be already, because I really had been thinking about it for years. I knew it was going to be about people's lives and how they found their way over time into a career that's satisfying and fulfilling for them, and how they started and how they over time emerged into something that was meaningful to them. And so then it was a matter of, how do you get started? I hired a writing coach to me, because I knew that if I didn't have some structure and some framework to work with, as independent as I am, self-employed, I knew I needed someone to help me set it up and work on it. And I actually ended up working with that coach for a year. And ironically, I started writing in January 2020, and then the pandemic hit. And, fortunately for me, we went on lockdown. I had lots of time to write.
So the book was released by January this year, right? It's about two
Yeah,
months already. Um, so what is that you would want to share in the book that you would like to share to our audience, and who's
sure.
the audience that you would aiming to, who's benefiting from reading this book?
Thank you for asking that. So the book it's 9 chapters. Each chapter is a theme, and the themes are all focused on around a topic that's usually something that might be an obstacle or a barrier that is a very normal thing that many of us might hold us back from pursuing something we really want for ourselves, whether it's, oh, it's too late, I'm too old, or I have too many responsibilities to pursue something because I have to take care of too many other people, or I've invested so many years in this one career already. How could I possibly walk away from it to pursue something else? those kinds of things. So, and there's other themes in there too that I address. And then I have stories that relate to each of those themes, and those stories are of people who actually did go beyond those obstacles, so that I can show you how possible it is to go beyond those obstacles in a practical and satisfying way, to find a pathway that is satisfying. So that's sort of how the book is structured. Each chapter ends with some reflective questions and guiding activities. At the very end of the book, there's a resources section with podcasts, websites, and other and books that I think are helpful to anybody who is trying to figure out what they want to do next. I would say that most of the people that the book is probably good for are people who are either sort of in the middle of their career or later on in their career. And they're saying, you know what, maybe I'm happy right now, or maybe I'm not happy right now, but I'm starting to think about what I want to do next. And yet I keep thinking about all the reasons not to make a change, or I just want to kind of get inspired. But what has surprised me is there are people who have been reading the book who are even younger than, and I'm surprised how many people are younger, and retired people who are reading the book. I'm surprised by that too. And so I think what's happening is that people are just enjoying the stories, that it's 22 stories of really interesting lives. Like one of the first stories in the book is about a guy who started his career as a Methodist minister, and then he went and he joined the FBI and became a hostage negotiator.
Wow,
You know,
fascinating. And Tammy, we have a few minutes left to, so I really want to say this. I think that the work is very important in our lives, and then if we don't have a happy work, we're not gonna have a happy life. So I think the work that the book and the work that you do is very meaningful for many people to find the fulfillment, working experience, working career, and so that it can contribute to their life in the happier way. So thank you for doing that. And I'll definitely will contact you after this to order the books that you can send to my daughter, because I believe that it's not only for the people at the mid-life, mid-career. It's very important for a starter to think what is the career that meaningful for them. So it's not making them like me. When I was beginning of my career, I'm struggling finding what meaningful for myself, and I don't want that to happen to the young generation too. So thanks for doing that, Tammy, and I really enjoyed the conversation today. I really have, looking forward to meeting your cousin and your family when you guys come into Vietnam. All right.
thank you. Thank you so much. This was an absolute pleasure. You asked great questions, and I agree with you. I think if you're not happy at work, I think it does make for an unhappy life. And I think when we're parents, if we don't model for our children what it looks like to be happy at work, what are we telling them?
Yep. Thank you so much for the time. Thank you for everything that you shared today. And I wish you all the best. Tell your family that we say hello to your family also, all right?
And then for you as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.